Mercedes Fogarassi. I am here today with the pleasure of moderating this session, which we have entitled AI as an Opportunity for More Impactful Open Data. Welcome everybody here. It's great to see so many faces and so many people here from the very beginning. This session and this conversation is going to be part of the theme on AI for economic development and social good. As we all know, AI is very much often described as a transformative technology, but AI doesn't emerge in a vacuum. It really depends fundamentally on data, and with that in particular on high quality, trusted, well-governed public data. For decades, national statistical offices have been really at the core of all of this, and they have been invested in producing open data as a public good. Open data to inform policy, to strengthen accountability, and to support inclusive development. Today, AI changes the whole scale of that conversation. It also changes the speed that everything is happening, and of course it changes things in ways that data can actually be used, reused, and add value. But all of this raises which is a big conversation that's interlinked. And finally, how do we ensure that this transition and this that will determine whether AI truly enhances the public value of open data or not. With that, I'll introduce our speakers, and then we'll have some opening remarks on a video here. So in terms of our speakers, we'll start just directly to my left. We have Mr. François Fontenot, who is a Senior Policy Advisor at Paris 21. Paris 21 stands for the Partnership in Statistics for Development in the 21st Century. That happens to be where I work as well, so very delighted to have my colleague here. François is an advisor on AI and data to the Chief Statistician of the OECD. He has over 20 years' experience advancing innovation and capacity building in statistical systems, particularly in the Global South. Next to Mr. Fontenot, we have Rohit Bhardwaj. Rohit is the Deputy Director General at India's National Statistical Office, where he leads innovation and emerging technology initiatives in official statistics, including AI and data dissemination reforms. Next to Shri Bhardwaj, we have Christopher Maloney. Chris is a program officer at the Hewlett Foundation, where he supports the use of high-quality data and evidence in policymaking, particularly in Africa. He previously held senior roles at USAID and the Millennium Challenge Corporation. And then finally, at the end of the line there, we have Mr. Randeep Tour. He is a senior technical leader at Google and leads infrastructure strategy for the Data Commons. The Data Commons is an open source initiative making global public data more accessible and AI ready. So those are our four panelists here today. It's a pleasure to have everyone. And as I mentioned, we will have a quick opening remark from Mr. Stefan Verhulst. He is the, well, I was going to say on the screen there, but I'm on the screen. I am not Stefan. Let me just pull up his video there. He is the other speaker that you may have seen. We can turn the screen to see what my screen is. There we go. So we have Mr. Stefan Verhulst here, who will introduce himself and kick off the debate.
I am Stefan Verhulst. I'm the co-founder of the GovLab and of the Data Tank, and I'm also a research professor at the Tandon School of Engineering at New York University. And I'm delighted to be part of this panel. Unfortunately, I could not attend in person, but eager to share with you what we've been working on, which is ultimately the fourth wave of open data. Well, for the last few years, we've been working on trying to change the way we make decisions, improve decisions in terms of legitimacy and in terms of effectiveness by seeking how we can leverage data to make those decisions more data-driven. And so that's one of the reasons why about 15 years ago we started to work on first wave of open data was freedom of information. The second wave of open data was where governments were providing access to their data on their platforms. And the last wave, or the third wave, I would say, is ultimately where private sector also started to provide access to some of their data for public interest purposes. Suffice to say that all the waves were building on each other. It's not like one wave replaced the other wave, and they all brought new concepts to the table. Now, despite the fact that we have seen those three waves over the last 10 years or so, what we also have seen, and this is especially the case the last few years, we actually have seen a backlash against those open data movements, what I have called a data winter. Despite the fact that we are in an AI summer, we may actually also enter in a data winter, by which I mean a decreased access to data, and especially a decrease in the fact that data is made accessible. And here is, of course, where Gen AI comes into play. Because what we are seeing that AI can actually be a force for democratizing data as well. But open data can also be a force for improving AI is being trained or AI is performing as well. And so the fourth wave of open data is really the wave where AI and data is intersecting with each other, both in terms of open data for AI, where we have seen different scenarios play out where open data can play a role, whether it's to improve AI training or whether it's ultimately to augment some of the data sets that are needed in order to provide context-specific context and context-specific answers to particular kind of prompts. We have tried to catalog a lot of those scenarios that we have identified where open data can be a force for improvement of AI. And of course, some of those, as already mentioned, some of those examples really enable for augmentation using RAG models, for instance, that would allow for public interest use cases, such as, for instance, access to data or democratizing the use of open data by the general public. And one use case is, of course, where we have seen that AI can be used to provide conversational interface with data. You don't require a data science degree anymore to query data. You can actually do it through a chatbot or through another AI-enabled interface. Other use case where AI can be used is to, of course, provide synthetic data. But synthetic data can also be used in order to fill in gaps where typically data might be hard to get, where it might be sensitive, or it can fill in gaps where there is a lack of representation to a large extent. We also have seen that AI can start um, improve or at least detect challenges with regard to data quality. There's this whole movement around data contracts that can be automated using AI in order to make sure that the data, if the data that is ingested complies with a certain kind of data quality criteria. The question then is, of course, very briefly, how do we write the fourth wave? Well, the first one is to really make data AI ready. What are the requirements for data to be able to be used for AI? And that's also why we have been working on kind of updating the FAIR framework. We now have also suggested we should add ready for AI. The second element, and that's somewhat related to the first one, is that we also need to improve provenance of data. We really need to understand where does the data originate and also what was the context in which the data was collected, because that will be very important for subsequently AI training and for also making sure that the data does not hallucinate. We also have to start prioritizing public use cases for generative AI use and for the use of AI for open data. And this, of course, requires us to invest not only in AI literacy, but also in questions literacy. And I've spoken at length about the need to become more sophisticated in actually defining what are the priority use cases for which AI and open data can help. We also have to start thinking about innovation in institutions. And so, as already mentioned, a lot of the concern in today's data ecosystem is concern related to extraction. And that's why we see the emergence of data commons, which are kind of a new institutional way to provide access to data, quite often a way that seeks to align access to data with preferences and expectations of communities as well. So let me conclude by saying is that we are in this weird moment when it comes to open data. On the one hand, we see a massive backlash, and so we could say this is actually the worst of times when it comes to open data. Data has become more closed than ever before. But on the other hand, we also can be optimistic, and we see kind of the best of times emerging where AI can really become a force that enables us to democratize data in ways that we've never had before. So with that, I hope this fourth wave of data, of open data, sets the stage for the panel and might also be used as a way to really understand what is needed in order to ride the wave and especially to prevent a data winter from happening. Thanks so much for having me and best of luck with the panel.
All right. Well, thank you, Stefan. Hopefully, you're going to watch this later. Not exactly at this moment because I think it's about 4 a.m. for him over there in North America. But I think that was a really great way to kick us off here. And before we really make that technological shift and talk about AI from that perspective, I'd like to start with the institutions. So, turning over to you, Francois, tell us about the role of national statistical offices when it comes to data and AI. They've long been custodians and the trusted data stewards bring to this debate.
Thank you, Mercedes. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. NSO, National Statistical Offices, actually bring a lot to this debate, and actually much more than many of us would think. In this fantastic summit, if you check the program National Statistical Offices, you do a keyword search, it happens only for that session. So congratulations, you made it to the most important session, absolutely. But I'll try to explain to you why NSOs are so central and why, again, we need them to make the open data work. If AI is transforming the way data is used, this will be NSO who will ensure that this transformation strengthen public trust in data. Long before open data became popular, long before Gen AI, NSOs were already putting quality data out. Their core mission is simple but very powerful: producing data, good data, reliable data about people's life, the economy, the environment. Today, and we heard it from Stefan, we live in a world of data overload. There is more data everywhere than any time before. AI can generate text, can generate summaries, can generate data sets, including fake data. But I would say in this data flood, this is the NSO who actually play a unique role. They produce data that are validated, that are quality controlled, that are transparent and comparable across time and countries. And that's the first thing which NSO bring to the AI debate. They bring the quality fuel which AI systems need to function, and that's a very significant contribution. Second, NSO brings structure and standards. The AI, I think we know it works best when data are machine readable, well documented, and structured. NSOs produce standards on how to do this. They produce classifications, they maintain consistent time series, they provide metadata, which explains the context for numbers. In short, they structure the reality of the world, which AI can then digest. So that's the second contribution: quality data plus standards and structure. Third, the NSO, and that's very important in the world we have, they operate under very strong legal and ethical framework. They protect confidentiality. They follow principles of neutrality. They serve the public interest, not commercial incentives. So in the AI era, all this matters more than ever. Again, official statistics are optimized for societal value and not necessarily for commercial value. So that's what the NSO brings, and that's quite a lot when you think about it. Now, how is AI changing the game for NSOs? In Paris 21, we are quite optimistic. You could hear Stefan, balancing the plus and the minus. I'd like to focus on the positive. we see two areas of opportunities for AI for NSOs. The first one really is on data production. If you look at it, check the SDG data, all the development data, there are still a lot of data gaps. And AI gives us a chance to produce more granular, more useful, more timely data. And there's work which we are doing actually together with Google and NSO in Mongolia to produce better, quicker population and housing data using AI and satellite imagery. So the world is thriving with innovation based on AI. The second area of opportunity is really access, and I think India is a good example of what serious people can do good with AI. And we all agree, and Stefan was mentioning this, data is still very complex to find, to understand, to use. And if a clever chatbot can put good data at the fingertips of users, should it be the media, should it be the population or policymakers, that's a blessing. Of course, you need serious people to make it work, and I think NSO are serious people who want to make it work. So in Paris 21, I would say that we see AI as an accelerator of the data evolution. We are hopeful and we have reasonable hope that AI can be a force for good for open data. In the end, AI, I think, will not replace NSOs. AI will reward those NSOs which are modern, open, structured, and trusted. So AI will make NSOs thrive. Yet, if we want AI to strengthen open data and the public debate associated with public data, then it's important to invest in NSOs and in the foundational dimensions of statistical capacity on this.
Thank you very much. That was really, really helpful. I like the way that you framed it with the three things, especially that the NSO brings to this conversation, as well as the importance for investment. So now I'd like to hear from the NSO here. Rohit, if you could tell us, in this AI-driven ecosystem, especially when it comes to an evolution of the role of NSOs, as Francois mentioned, should the NSO act primarily as a data producer or as a steward and a regulator of data and statistics?
Thank you, Masjid. Thank you, Pansua. I thought half the work had been done by yes, thank you very much once again. So let me just discuss it in two different manners. So one is, in present role, NSOs cannot have a binary or exclusive role that I'll be only data producing and somebody else will take up the onus of being a data steward. It has to be a combination or intersection. Now, NSO's role has to evolve, and it needs to evolve from being only a passive data producer to something which is orchestrating the entire data ecosystem. So that is how I look at NSOs. To begin with, let me talk about the production capacity, which François, my colleague, talked in detail, but I just want to emphasize on few points. One is that what NSOs produce, that cannot be produced in any other ecosystem. So NSOs has continued to produce data which it produces, the GDPs, the CPIs, the inflation, the socio-economic indicators, the surveys. It's just impossible for any other organization to produce so much of data. So data needs to be produced by NSOs, and we need continue to produce those data. Most importantly is that we have been say NSO India. Let's talk about NSO India. NSO India has a history of almost 75 years, and now we are in our 76th years. Over a period of 76 years, different types of classification, codes, templates have been created, best practices have been absorbed over a period of time. So NSOs, with just because of its legacy, has the capacity to produce quality data which I feel no other organization has. And most importantly, let me tell you one more thing here, that NSO is supposed to produce data for analysis. If you really think about any other source of data, the primary use is not analysis. Administratively, it's for administration. Geospatial is for something else, not for analysis. So NSO is the only organization which produces data for policy making, for analysis. As a result, the NSO's data is comparatively, I'll say, nothing is perfect, comparatively has better quality, better standards, better production philosophies in comparison to any other data. But having said that, I don't mean that other data are less important, and other data is equally important, but we need to work with those data to bring it to the standards on which the NSO data is produced. A. Now, second point, and Maziz, you are free to tell me when my time is over. Okay. So the second point is that, but what is the evolving role of NSO? So we have to understand that their NSO has an evolving role, and that evolving role I saw it in four pillars. One is data governance, which we all talk about, talking and how to govern any data. Then second is, which is to me is very important, is validating a data set. So administrative data has been created, but whether that data is up to the mark for analysis for use by AI, that is something I would say is very important, and NSO plays that role to validate that data set. Then orchestrating the entire data ecosystem. And I mean, what do I mean by that? The example is that on 24th of this month, we are going to call every state government to talk about how to best use their administrative data. So orchestrating the ecosystem to work to better the data for AI. And lastly, which is also very important, is ethical requirements, trust, and all that. So this is what, and we at NSO India have been working on it. We have our own national metadata standards. We have our quality frameworks. We have our own codes and classifications. We have a digital bouquet of data dissemination, because if data cannot be accessed, there's no point talking about data even. So the very logic of NSO existing is data dissemination. That is why we are working on it, and all of you must be knowing. Most of you may be knowing that NSO India has come out with the MCP server as well. So you don't have to come out with your own, and it has your own environment. If you have a cloud subscription, work there and the cloud and get it connected to our database and do whatever you like to with that. So this is a few things I wanted to tell you. So we cannot be any more binary. It has to be a mix of both. That's what my point is.
Thank you, Rohit. I think that's a very logical answer, and thanks for laying that out. So now we've spoken about the roles, the mandates, but let's get practical. Randy, from a technical perspective, if a ministry wants to publish an open data set tomorrow, what are 3 things that really need to be in place for this data to be AI ready and for responsible reuse at scale?
Thank you for that question. And I know in a couple of previous comments, these topics may have come up. I'm going to emphasize on those again here. The 3 key principles that we at Google and Data Commons are putting in place is using and enriching metadata. I know Rohit also mentioned metadata is so important. And once the data is enriched with right amount of metadata, that data will be easily understood by agents in today's world. And then comes your standards. We can't just operate in different 20, 30 different ways of organizing the data. We have to have certain set of standards like schema.org, SDMX, NMDS, but they have to be interoperable. We have to build adapters so that these standards can talk to each other. Otherwise, we will still be in like my standard is best standard or not. So that is a very important aspect. And last but not least, from the third thing I would say is the provenance. When I say provenance, I'll explain in a very natural language. Is when you take any food product and you read there is nutrition label, it tells you a lot of information about where that food was produced, what is the content, what kind of nutrition information. Something like that, data needs it too. Data needs provenance, which tells where it originated from, what kind of usage this data could be used. Is it public? Is it open? Is it restricted? And in addition, there could be additional enrichment on provenances. As data travels, there has to be some sort of a history of that travel and if there are any enrichment or changes have been made. So that way, we not only know where data is coming, how it has traveled, but how you can use it as well. So these are the 3 key points I would say that would make your data AI ready in a reasonable way the agents can talk to this data.
Thank you. That's, yes, claps all around. That was really great to hear, especially for the work that we're doing. I think that answers a lot of my questions in terms of my day job. So this is very helpful for guiding me as well. In terms of, so now we've discussed the institutional roles, the technical conditions, but taking a bit of a step back, over to you, Chris. What's actually new in AI in this moment, and what's new to this debate today?
Sure. So, as opposed to my esteemed panelists, I am not a technical statistician, or I come from the world of philanthropy And specifically, I am most focused on working with grantees primarily in Africa that are helping unlock the data revolution for better policymaking across the continent, ensuring a strong, robust data governance around that. And what's been interesting is in the 4 years of overseeing this portfolio, we've gone from talking about data revolution and data governance to AI revolution and AI governance. But the issues remain largely the same, and that shouldn't be surprising because at the end of the day, data is just the lifeblood that's making AI work, right? And so I sometimes wonder, like 30 years ago, would we have thought about Excel? We put data into Excel, we got an interesting insight. Now we put data into an LLM. And we get exciting insights. So what's changed is we've gone from the narrow to the general. We're going from something that was very expert and niche to something that, in theory, anybody could use. We've gone from something where we would use a little bit of data to now we can use all of the data, in theory, right? So it's this speed and scale which I think is making it different. But coming back to sort of thinking about, at least in the context that I focus on in Africa, my main concern is that a lot hasn't changed because unless we're worrying about some of these more fundamental issues, I do worry that AI is in some sense a storm in a teacup, at least in parts of Africa and other parts of the global south, and further enhancing this wedge between the north and the south. So we still need to worry about connectivity. We need to worry about electricity. We need to worry about infrastructure, capacity. We need to worry about multi-stakeholder approaches for participation and governance. We need to worry about sovereignty, and we need to worry about accountability mechanisms. All of these big fundamentals, that's just one whole piece. And then the other side, of course, is having that data in the first place. You need local data. We need local languages in that data. We need the trust and safety behind that data as well. And all of those fundamentals are still very, very weak in many of the countries that I'm working in. And so that's the question that I keep coming back to is, are we moving the needle on these fundamentals for this to truly be meaningful?
I think that's a very, very important question and highlights some of the things that I think the rest of the conference this week are really going to talk about in terms of the connectivity importance, the capacity importance, and of course also the importance of local data. But one of the other elements I think that always comes to mind, especially for official statistics, is trust. So Rohit, I'd like to hear from you again, especially as AI systems actually generate their own insights. How can governments ensure that official statistics remain the real trusted reference point for decision making in policy?
I tried asking this question to AI, and what I got was, really didn't make me happy. So it talked about legal, it talked about audit trail, it talked about provenance, and it didn't make. We need to talk about AI readiness of data first in terms of how people understand it. We keep talking about in technical languages, jargons, we remain in these bubbles. And we all understand what bubble is, where few are inside it and rest of all of us are outside it. So that is why the problem I see. So I'm perfectly in agreement with my panelists here when they say, what is AI readiness of data? It is, in two lines, it is data and metadata problem. So if I want to make my my data trustworthy, how should I do it? So I cannot stop any person or a chat GPT or anyone seeking an answer about data. Now, being an NSO, I need to ensure that that question is directed to my database. My database is the preferred way to look at, to search for that answer. That is the trust. That's how I'm going to generate trust. And as part of it, we have done many of the activities. We have ensured that metadata is available. We have MCP servers. So anyway, if you plug that tool in, it straight away goes to my database. So I'll say, Masdiz, that it is important that we see this trust thing not from the legality spectacles, but from the point of view of AI readiness. And if data is AI ready, believe me, it's going to be used by any AI system. So interoperability is one. And lastly, public engagement and literacy is also very important. if we can't do these two things, I think it would be difficult. People should know whether it is right to ask a question to a AI or go to their NSO's web portal to seek that answer. So these are the 2 points I wanted to say.
Definitely, I think the data literacy is absolutely an important part. And back to that question about AI readiness as well, I think that brings up what Randeep was saying earlier. I know, so Randeep, maybe just back over to you. If there's a concrete example that comes to mind where AI actually improved the quality or usability of public data.
I mean, I don't have to go too far. Data Commons is that example where we have implemented and brought in data from various different organizations, NSOs, aggregators, government agencies, and we've connected the dot between what is the, and I'll use an example like when there's a diabetes, what's the correlation of diabetes to food scarcity or surplus of that? And having that ability to ask that question in natural language has been a key aspect that Data Commons has also enabled. As Rohitji was saying, right? People should be able to talk to this data in the language that data understands. So in terms of with the Data Commons implementation, bringing the data into a single standard format or interoperable format, enriching with that metadata, and then serving it through natural language is what Data Commons is an example. And just also reverse playing that, we implement these principles internally at Google as well for our enterprise data, where our business operations can use natural language to make sure our internal data is also following these same principles. So we're not really we're not just talking the talk, but we're walking the talk as well.
Thank you. That was the exact wording I was going to use. You're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So that's great. Thanks for the example. Francois, at the global level, how are things changing in statistical systems, and how is the global statistical community adapting to this conversation?
Thank you, Mercedes. Again, I think the statistical community, what we can observe, has understood that AI is going to stay. It's not going to go. And you can see the community really tackling the issue seriously, from understanding together what it means for them to be AI ready, defining, as Chris was saying, what comes in the cloud of NSOs, what is outside of the cloud of NSOs, electricity, connectivity, at times, data governance in the country as well, and what they can influence to make it work. So the community is very serious about it. We have started to update our systems. There were a few examples here from India using MCPs for dissemination. We have started to update our people as well. There's a lot of training going on at times where the financial situation of that community is not super rosy. You have some lead NSOs in the world which budget are cut by 1/3. So this comes at a time where the statistical industry really needs to modernize and adjust. One thing which was said by my panelists was the need to invest in citizens. You have a few countries where NSOs are actually taking a lead role in this, both the normal layman on the streets, trying to make them aware of beauties of quality data. What Randeep was saying, understanding the difference between something which is trustworthy, which is coming from documenting sources, and something which is fake. When you check the actual ability of people globally to do this, it's not going on the right direction neither. You check the numbers from the OECD in terms of mathematical ability of students or people, the trend is downward. So that's a bit worrying. Yet, you have a few countries where by specifically addressing statistical literacy, you can make a difference. So I think the community is in a good position, is aware of what needs to happen. There are lots of exchange of experience in the UN, in the OECD, in Paris 21. A lot of, I would say, aggressive piloting and a lot of wise deployment, because the NSO, the statisticians, are wise people. They'll not go for the hype and the heat of the moment, but they are serious about improving quality of the data they release.
like that. Aggressive piloting and wise deployment. I think that's maybe another keyword we can keep using. So looking ahead, Chris, given everything that's been discussed here today, and I really appreciate you saying that you're not a statistician, but I think you bring immense value to the statistical conversation that we have here. But would you say that we're entering a renaissance for open data, or are we more at a time where AI can actually undermine the value of public official statistics? What do you think?
Similar to my colleague here, when I got this question, I was like, God, I don't know. I'm going to ask ChatGPT. so no, jokes aside, but it's a tricky one, of course, because there is no right answer. But I do think it's interesting to sort of think through what are the pros and what are the cons, and then sort of map in real life. So the first is, what makes us think that this could be a positive renaissance? Well, if a country has really strong, well-structured, high-quality data, then AI is obviously going to increase the value of that because it'll help reduce hallucinations, it'll help reduce bias. You have this really powerful tool, but you require that fundamental there first. Similarly, if you have a robust ecosystem of researchers, of startups, of civic innovators, similarly, once again, now you've created this wonderful tool where you could overlay AI on top of open data and help foster that community, even democratized to some degree, accessibility data, flooding the ecosystem that can rapidly erode trust if that's not being properly managed. Do we risk similarly, I was thinking spiral. Finally, if we have these magical systems, does that create a sort of perverse incentive in countries wherein we actually decrease funding for surveys, for censuses, other things like that, because we can just do we risk sort of creating? And so there's no right answers here, but these tensions are something that every country, every NSO, and then finally, if we have these magical systems, I was reflecting a little bit on my own perverse incentives in countries of limited budgets, wherein we actually decrease funding for surveys, for censuses, other things like that, because, well, we can just have AI do it, right? And so there's no right answers here, but these tensions are something that every country, every NSO is going to have to be grappling with. And so I was reflecting a little bit on my own sort of 10 years ago, there was literally a law those of you who are familiar with Africa, if you published 10 years ago that was not blessed, there was literally a law in Tanzania that if you published a statistic there was an experience in Uganda about 6 or 7 years ago where the World Bank there was an experience in Uganda about 6 or 7 years ago where the World Bank president had gone on record by saying Uganda as an LMIC, sorry, as an LIC, when the president had gone on record by saying they were an LMIC Uganda with data. There has to be someone from the NSO. So now that if you basically do anything Uganda with data, so think to myself, with AI now turbocharging this, does that now create incentive for even a further with AI now turbocharging this, does that now create incentive for even a further hope is seeing, or does that sort of go in the other direction? One thing that gives me a little bit of hope people who are actually now trying to bring rigor recently of citizen and voice to the data who are actually now trying to bring rigor every day to help and voice. So I do see the data that they themselves are experiencing or could collect every day to help augment what's going on. Just some of the tensions. I do see this little bit of a bridge there.
I like the way you framed it with the tensions there, and also the mention of citizen-generated data, which I like the way you framed it with the mentions there, and also the sources, citizen-generated data, which of course official statistics are what we're talking about. The data sources, all of them the tensions that we're looking at official statistics are what we're talking about mainly here. Citizen-generated data, the tensions that we're looking at need to be addressed. And so we do have about 10 minutes left. There's a big clock that I'm very aware of, so I want to keep to time. We do have about 10 minutes. I do want to see if maybe anybody here has a question, and while people think about putting up their hands, I do want to see if anybody here has a question to the whole panel. Think about putting up their hands. But when it comes to provocative the risk that we're all talking about in these tensions that you mentioned, Chris. But when it comes to the risk that AI companies benefit more from open public data than the citizens who actually funded its production. Benefit more from have a quick think on that, and then citizens who actually funded its production. Does have a question? I saw a hand go up right there, so I'm going to call on you. You are the lucky question asker. Please, hand go up right there, so I'm going to call on you. You are the lucky question asker. Where you're coming from? If you could tell us.
My name is Prem Ganguly. I'm a final year
student. You could tell us who you are, where you're coming from.
My question is for Rohit. My name is Prem Ganguly. I'm a final year student. So deals with lots of data, right? My question is for Rohit, sir. That AI has in data collection lots of data biasness. The biggest issue completely has in data collection is data biasness. How does AI impact the decision? Completely changes the model's standards that and how does AI impact the decision for data biasness and standards that NSO followers for data biasness and reliability.
Just before we answer that, I'll take maybe one or two other questions. I saw a quick hand over here as well. Just before we answer that, I'll take maybe one or two other questions. I saw a quick hand over here as well.
So hi, I am Sharad and I am representing data science. So hi, I am Sharad and I am representing and my question is data science in your non-profit called Data Kind today. And my question is to AI data needs to have both data and metadata. So what are the most data needs to have both data and metadata? So what are the most priority components that those but what should have. Like there is provenance, there is
All right,
possibly
I'll
the
take.
source, but what
I don't know
else?
which one is working here.
Okay.
All right, I'll
Hello.
take. I don't know which one is
So
working.
my question is, Mr. Christopher.
Okay.
I'm Akansh.
So
I'm
my
an
question is,
aspiring researcher, and
Mr.
I often
Christopher,
face the issue
I'm Akansh.
that was
I'm an
mentioned by
aspiring
the previous
researcher, and I often
questionnaire
face
too,
the issue
that there's a lack of
that was mentioned
granularity
by
within
the
the
previous
metadata that is given
questionnaire
to the
too,
same
that there's a
to
lack
the
of
same
granularity
repository
within the metadata
and
that is
when it
given
comes
to
to
the
open
same
data, that becomes
to the
an
same
even more
repository.
important challenge.
And when it
Considering
comes to
that
open
there's no
data,
fixed
that becomes
pipeline
an
because
even
of
more important
multimodal
challenge,
nature of the same
considering
data.
that there's no
And
fixed
so my question
pipeline
was,
because of
how much
multimodal
granular
nature
is
of the
enough
same data,
so that we
and
could
so my question
cross
was,
verify?
how
Could
much
implement our
granular
own
is
checksums,
enough,
if you will,
so that we could
for the data
cross
that
verify?
we have,
We
for
could
instance,
implement our own
sensors,
checksums, if you
for
will,
IoT
for
devices,
the data that we have, for instance, for
Thank you, and we'll
sensors,
take
for,
one last question
for
here.
IoT devices.
Thank you. I'm Dolly Bhasin.
Thank you, and we'll take one last question here.
Thank you.
So this
I'm
question
Dolly
is
Bhasin.
basically on open innovation. Now there is a lot
So
of
this question is basically on open
innovators who
innovation.
have been working
Now there
on
is a lot
different
of
aspects of
open
innovation,
innovators who
and they
have been
require a lot
working
of
on
data.
different aspects
How
of
is
innovation,
and they
what
require
is
a
the
lot
kind
of
of
data.
status on
How is
using of this data to
what is
really
the
do
kind of
open innovation
status on
using of
for,
this data
like,
to
say, for
really
example,
do
a
open
sandbox
innovation
on fintech, or a
for,
sandbox
like
on,
say for example a
sandbox
sandbox
on, or sandbox
data
or a
is
sandbox
distributed.
on,
But if you really want to
tourism
do
or
any
sandbox
new
where there is
innovation
data is
using
distributed,
AI,
you
but if
require
you
a
really
lot of
want to
data
do
set.
any new
Now,
require a lot
that's
of
the
data
first
set.
part of the question.
Now, what
Second
is
part
the
of the
policy
question
on
is
that?
that
How do we
that's the
govern
first part of the question. Second part
when
of the
we are
question
in
is
a
that
distributed
how do we govern
environment?
how do we govern that
When we
data,
are in a
especially
distributed
if
environment?
one central
How do we
body is
govern
really
that
holding
data?
that data, then it
Especially
becomes
if,
easy.
but if there
One
are
central
multiple
body is really
people
holding
who are
that
holding
data,
that
then
data,
it
how
becomes
do we
easy.
really govern
But
that
if there
data?
are multiple people who are holding
All right,
that
so
data,
that's been
how
some
do
really
we
interesting
govern that?
questions, and then I know I have a little provocative question there as
All right,
well
so
in
that's
terms
been
of
some
who
really
benefits
interesting
most.
questions, and then I
We've
know
got
I have
6 minutes
a little
left.
provocative
So
question
I'm
there
going to
as
turn it
well
over
in
to the
terms of
panel,
who
answer
benefits
any of
most.
those questions.
We've got 6 minutes left,
And
so
if you want to offer
I'm going
a
to turn
quick
it over to
closing
the
remarks,
panel,
it's up to
answer
you.
any of those
Randy, I see you
questions,
grabbed the mic, so I'm
and
going to
if
go
you want to
first.
offer a quick closing remark.
I'll,
It's up
I'll
to you.
take a
Randy, I
point
see
on
you
the
grabbed the
you're
mic, so I'm going to go with you first.
I'll take a point on the you're providing. So
I can't say
in my opinion, so public data is in my opinion available today in its silos. Public data is large available today in its corporations silos. Like Google, large put in effort to like bringing corporations like that public Google data should into put open world, so like through open source projects public like data commons. Through this project, we are making this through open source openly available through open APIs. Through this project, providing this data openly technologies like MCP server, APIs, and agents providing enable this technologies like MCP server to be an agent interoperable. Enable this having public data connectivity between the data as well, interoperable, so that normal people can talk connectivity to this data between the data in the natural language, so that and get that normal information people can talk to this data. So in the natural language, while and get that I do see that they want. So this while is only possible I do when see that multiple of these large organizations this will come in is only possible and start when making multiple this public data these large organizations will using all these standards and start making this about public data, making it openly available using all these standards and principles we talked about, open APIs and making MCP it openly available through open source platforms, open APIs and MCP servers and stuff like that.
I'll try and link the two questions actually on granularity and governance because I think they are actually linked. I'll try and link the two questions actually on granularity and governance because I think they are actually linked. One, I think this is where it comes down to, and what are the mechanisms in place in the country to advocate? What does the community want and need, and what are the mechanisms in place in a country to advocate? One thing that I've been very focused on in particular countries is working with institutions that are really helping define national, in some cases even working with institutions that are really helping define national and some cases even subnational data strategies that are articulating. I certainly have some amazing grantees who do know what they are, and so I think that is a really big question. I certainly have some amazing grantees who do know what they are, and so I think that is a really big question: is how do you really localize the questions you're asking? One last thing, though, is I love your provocative question, and I can't resist because that's my favorite space. One last thing, though, is I love your provocative question, and I can't resist. I'm of two minds here. If you have a robust, thriving, ecosystem of innovators and researchers, as much as with any private company, other actors who can leverage the data, then yes, they can. At least in the context of the African continent, too much what I'm concerned about is but AI to get better, at least in the context of the African continent, too much what I'm concerned about is for AI to get better and better, it needs more data. All sorts Africa is the last frontier, arguably, in my opinion, somewhat unethical. And so you're seeing all sorts of. So if you look at Kenya in the past 2 months in the massive bilateral health agreement. If you look at Kenya and the US, bilateral health agreement within that is the turning over of tons of agreement is health data tied up because required within that is the turning over of tons of. You think back to about 2 years ago, you have the reason why Tools for Humanity's WorldCoin. You think back to about 2 years ago, you have Tools for Humanity's WorldCoin, essentially scanning Kenyan farmers' irises to build its proof. That was essentially scanning Kenyan farmers' irises to build its proof of personhood LLM. So when we're seeing those practices in environments that are very power asymmetric, so when we're seeing those practices in environments that are very no like yes or no answer, it's going to be very context dependent. But again, there's no like yes or no answer. It's going to be very context dependent.
So quick points on data access. So, as you all be aware, Government of India has quick points on data something access. Called AI Codes. As you all be aware, Government of India has a lot of data is available there. Something called may AI not be a perfect data, but a lot of data is available. A lot of then we have open data. Then we have may not be a perfect data, but a lot of data is available. Then we have open data portal. Then we have our own request all of you to just search. All of these are available. Then there is a micro data portal. Don't need to request all of you to just search. All of these are available through APIs. Don't need you are innovator. You are developer for that. Access the data through APIs. So that's part one. You are developer, access the data through API and part one. I think there is a real threat that in shorter term, I mean the data is there is a real threat that perhaps the benefit might just flow more. I mean the data is created with the public money, but it's very easy to handle that. We should have it defined. Look, open data to handle that. We should have it defined. Look, open data is not free data. Not that way. We open data should be open data. Open data should be open data. It should not have contextual open data agreement of data contribution. We should have a data contextual policy agreement of data contribution. Cost to our data. We should have it then going forward. We'll have easier way forward. A cost to our data, and probably then going forward we'll have easier way forward. That's how I look at it.
Thank you for the very good questions. I'll go with the ones on metadata and how much. Thank you for the very good questions. I'll go with the ones on metadata and how much. The good news is metadata statistical community speaking with the tech on what the good news metadata, is the statistical tech solutions eventually can find what is good eventually last week find the good data which is NSOs in Africa of this world. Actually, last week we put the metadata in the form which can be digested. Actually, help them put the metadata in the form which can be digested by the AI machine. It's not 200 tags as much. So the answer tags as the machine can help you to put along your metadata tags as the machine can help you to by the machine along your metadata your data so it's read by working by the machine solutions and they are very question working level solutions
obviously because of time. Well, thank you for all of that. Just on a quick ending note there, I think Rohit, what you hit on about open data is just on a quick ending note there, I think Rohit, what you hit on about open data, it was built on something, and the costs that go into it might not look like the tangible. It's out there, but it was built on something, and the costs that go into it might not look like the tangible. The work that we do with countries, that's one thing that we do talk about quite a lot, and that we emphasize. The work that we do with countries, there are data out there that we do talk about quite a lot, and that we emphasize. So I think it's an important thing for us all to consider when we do think about how free are they accessing, using. So I think it's an important thing for us all to consider when we do think about where is the value going, and who is benefiting from that. Of these data is really where is the value going, and who is benefiting. I hope we can leave on that note. And a big round of applause for our speakers here. So big round of applause for you all for coming out. And a big round of applause for our speakers for you all for coming out. I see in big red letters. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of the conference. So I will release all of you. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of the conference.
Bravo. Really good. Thank you. Amazing. Bravo. Really good. Thank you. Amazing.